Over the last 24 hours, I've traveled to the south of Israel, and now we're in the West Bank. And I can tell you that on the front lines of Gaza, even though a ground operation is not happening, the devastation wrought by the Hamas terrorist group is writ large. I visited some of the worst affected areas to bring you these reports. I'm standing here on the threshold of Jenin. It's a city in the West Bank. The roadside behind you tells you which direction it is, and that is the West Bank. We're the first Indian crew right here at the doorstep of Jenin, which we're going to try and get into. But I want to tell you a little bit more about Jenin at this point of time. This is a place that has been struck by an airstrike just a couple of days ago for only the second time in over 2 decades. Now, the West Bank, much of which is under Israeli administration, has pockets under the Palestinian Authority. Jenin has been conspicuously notorious through the entire history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, Jenin is not only a place that has been struck by an airstrike, where the Al-Ansar Mosque, just about a couple of kilometers in that direction, that's Jenin you see right there, in that direction is where the airstrike took place, but it's also a place where more airstrikes will happen. I spoke a couple of days ago to one of the lead spokespersons of the Israeli Defense Forces, and this entire territory is still under Israel, and they say more airstrikes might happen. The difference between Gaza and Jenin is that Gaza is under Hamas, Jenin is under a political party called Fatah, which is a rival party of the Hamas. Now, the Fatah, which constitutes the Palestinian Authority, has not been able to exercise much control over what happens in this part of the West Bank, which is the northern part of the West Bank in Jenin, which has this refugee camp, which was finally struck in that airstrike. This particular airstrike takes place on the Al-Ansar Mosque because, incredibly, Israel believes that plans were afoot by an emboldened Hamas to conduct a similar terrorist attack from Jenin on Israeli territory using the same kinds of resources, paragliders, rockets, missiles, that kind of thing. And that's one of the reasons why they took the difficult decision to conduct an airstrike in Jenin. Jenin has many different names. Among Palestinians, it's called the Martyrs' Capital. Among Israelis, it's called the Hornet's Nest because it has been a bedrock and a haven for many of the extremist groups among the Palestinians, including the Al-Quds, which is the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The Jenin is also home to the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is the military faction of the Fatah political party. But 2023 has actually seen much more happening in Jenin. It's a place where the Israeli Defense Forces don't like to venture in because it's very much like Gaza. It's a heavily populated area. As you can see, even from this distance, Jenin is a pretty crowded area. Somewhere right above that hill is the refugee camp as well, and it's a difficult place to administer, and that's the reason why the Israel Defense Forces have very rarely gone inside Jenin. But earlier this year, we did see some fighting taking place where there were a lot of casualties. Last year, an Al Jazeera journalist was famously shot dead in what became a global controversy as well. So Jenin continues to be a hot spot. It's over 70 years old. It's one of the first refugee camps that came up, but it continues to be a hot spot as far as terror against Israel is concerned. In Jenin, in the West Bank, Shiv Arur for India Today. As the first journalist on the threshold of Jenin, India Today has been told that we are just about 1.5 kilometers from where that airstrike took place on Sunday morning. The Al-Ansar Mosque was struck, and not many people know that Jenin is considered the second most restive Palestinian territory after Gaza. And it was from here that the Hamas was expected to launch perhaps another strike, opening another front against Israel. And that's why, breaking many years of tradition, Israel decided to conduct an airstrike in the West Bank at the Jenin refugee camp.
Amid the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas, Israel opened a fresh front in its offensive. In a major escalation, Israeli forces carried out their first major airstrike in the West Bank on Sunday. Israel struck a compound beneath Al-Ansar Mosque in the West Bank's Jenin, killing at least one person. The Israeli forces said the mosque conceals terror cells of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and terror groups have been using the mosque as a command center to plan terror attacks.
Based on specific intelligence inputs, the Israeli forces mounted an airstrike even in the West Bank, targeting the Al-Ansar Mosque, saying Hamas terrorists were not just hiding in the mosque, but were also storing weapons for an imminent attack on Israeli civilians.
And a day later, Hamas hit back at Israeli defense forces deployed in west of Jenin. The Hamas attacks were to avenge deaths of terror operatives in Israeli airstrikes in West Bank's Jenin. As the war reaches the West Bank, so far, dozens of Palestinian radials in West Bank have been killed in clashes with Israeli forces.
Israel's airstrike on the Al-Ansar Mosque in the West Bank shows that the beast has woken and it's going to go after every single asset of the Hamas. A hyper-alert intelligence is going to make sure that Operation Swords of Iron is not going to stop at anything whatsoever. And this also means that two big fronts are now completely open.
The West Bank strikes come after Israel conducted multiple raids in the region, arresting hundreds of Hamas workers and seizing massive cache of arms and ammunition aimed at attacking Israel. With Gaurav Sawant and Shiva Arur from Israel, Bureau Report, India Today.
The United States is sending missile defense technology to bolster its strength in the region. They've sent two big, giant aircraft carrier battle groups into the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. But the US is doing a whole lot more, except that it isn't really black and white. It's actually complicated, because the United States isn't only doing this for Israel, because American support for Israel is hardwired into bipartisan American politics. In fact, the United States is doing this much more for itself. Take a look at this report.
Strikes to punish provocations by the Hezbollah, the Iran-backed group that has carefully scaled up hostilities, opening up a war front on Israel's northern border. Just days ago, a US warship's air defense system intercepted a battery of cruise missiles launched by Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, south of Israel. What's clear is that in under 20 days, the Israel-Hamas war has exploded into a full West Asian crisis that could spiral into a global conflict. The United States of America, which has already deployed two giant aircraft carrier battle groups to the Mediterranean and Persian Gulf, has also decided to bolster advanced missile defense capabilities on the region. In its latest move, the Biden administration has decided to deploy additional terminal high-altitude air defense and Patriot anti-missile systems in the general area of Israel, as a shield against an increasingly belligerent Iran. The ratcheting up of tensions means Iran is on notice, with relations back to square one just weeks after the Biden administration had arrived at an elusive breakthrough with Iran, even unblocking billions in aid. Israel, which has rejected concerns of an expanding conflict, has said it will do what it must to defend itself, underwent the massacre of 7th October. Could the world be staring at a new mini-world war? With Shiva Arur in Israel, Bureau Report, India Today.
It's It's day 17 of the war, and here are the geopolitical updates. Israel's military said the number of people held captive was confirmed to be 212. Israel's defense forces says it struck some 320 targets in Gaza Strip belonging to the Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror groups. Now, shifting focus, Israel had said it is intensifying attacks on North Gaza and warned that anyone who stays risks being considered a terrorist sympathizer. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a security assessment in Tel Aviv together with members of the war cabinet and senior security establishment officials. In Gaza, a second aid convoy of 14 trucks entered Gaza via the Rafah border crossing in Egypt. The Israeli military has stated that one of its tanks accidentally fired and hit an Egyptian post near the Gaza border. The blast caused minor injuries, and both Israel and Egypt are conducting investigations into that incident. Lebanon. Overnight, Israel Defense Forces struck Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in Lebanon. 4 Hezbollah terrorist cells were struck. The United States of America's President Joe Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and welcomed the first 2 convoys of humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Also, Joe Biden held a call on Sunday with the leaders of Canada, France, Britain, Germany, and Italy to discuss the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. In Iran, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visits Tehran. Palestinian Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and Iranian Foreign Minister discussed the means of stopping the Israeli brutal crimes, quote-unquote, in the besieged Gaza enclave. Turkey sent its presidential plane with a medical team and supplies to Egypt on Sunday, carrying humanitarian aid for Gaza. Qatar, China's special envoy to the Middle East, now is in the region. Zaid Chun met with Qatar's top diplomat in Doha. He also attended a peace summit in Egypt earlier. He is to visit other Arab nations in the very region. Let's take a look at the war death toll. In West Bank, according to the Palestinian Authority, 91 deaths have occurred. According to the Hamas, that's the Gaza Health Ministry, over 4,651 are dead. And according to Israel, over 1,400 have died since October 7th.
Thanks for watching this special broadcast with me, Shiv Arur. We will continue to report from Israel, from the West Bank, and the front lines of the Gaza Strip. Remember, as war reporters, it is our job to show you what's happening on the ground, and we will continue to do so. Thanks very much for watching.